squirrel," she said to herself. "If I can catch it, how glad I'll be." She tried to make her way quietly through the underbush, but what was her terror when she saw a large snake coiled up and preparing to strike at her. She was so much frightened that she could not make a move, but brave Rover saw the snake and, springing forward, seized it by the neck and killed it with his mouth. When the faithful dog came and rubbed his head against her hand, Susie put her arms around his neck and burst into tears. "Oh, Rover, Rover," she cried. "You dear good dog, how sorry I am. I'm so selfish when I cry." Rover understood the tone of her voice, if he did not understand her words, and capered about in great glee, barking all the time. You may be sure that he got a plentiful supper that evening. Susie never forgot the lesson of that day. She soon learned to be on her guard against a selfish spirit and became a happier and more lovable little girl. This will be about our last one of our catch-up series of reading some catch-up work in this McGuffy's Reader, so we can kind of try to balance out the books. This one is entitled How Willie Got Out of the Shaft. Willie's aunt sent him for a birthday present a little writing book. There was a place in the book for a pencil. Willie thought a great deal of this little book, and he always kept it in his pocket. One day his mother was very busy, and he called his dog and said, "Come, Caper, let's have a play." When Willie's mother missed him, she went out the door and looked out, but she couldn't see him anywhere. But she knew that Caper was with him and thought that they would be back before too long. Now she waited another hour, and still they did not come back. When she came to the gate by the road, she met Mr. Lee and told him how long Willie had been gone. Mr. Lee thought he must have gone to sleep under some trees or something, because he hadn't seen him. So they went to all the trees under which Willie was in the habit of playing, but Willie was nowhere to be found. Now by this time the sun had gone down. The news that Willie was lost soon spread over the whole neighborhood, and all the men and women turned out to hunt. They hunted all night looking for him. The next morning the neighbors were gathered around, and all were trying to think, what could they do next? When Caper the dog came bounding into the room, there was a string tied around his neck and a little bit of paper tied to the string. Willie's father, Mr. Lee, took the paper and saw that it was a letter from Willie. He read it aloud, and it said, "Oh, Father, come to me. I am in the big hole in the pasture. I'm stuck." Everybody ran at once to the far corner of the pasture, and there was Willie, alive and well, in the bottom of the shaft. Oh, how glad he was when his father caught him up in his arms and lifted him out. Now, I'll tell you how Willie came to be in the shaft. He and Caper went to the pasture, the field, just to play a little bit, and they came to the edge of the shaft and sat down in it, bending over to see how deep it was. Willie lost his balance and fell in. He tried very hard to get out, but could not. When the good little dog saw that his master was in the shaft, he would not leave him, but ran around and around and around, trying to reach down, barking, and trying somehow to pull him out. But while little Caper was pulling Willie by the coat sleeves, a piece of sod gave way under his feet, and Caper fell in too. Willie called for his father and mother as loud as he could, but he was so far away from the house, no one could hear him. He cried till it was dark. Then he lay down on the ground, and Caper lay down, and they went to sleep. Willie just cried and cried when he woke up. When he fully awoke in the morning, he began to try to think of a way to get out. The little writing book that his aunt had given him was in his pocket. He took it out, and after a good deal of trouble, wrote the letter to his father. Then he tore the leaf out and took a string out of his pocket and tied it round Caper's neck and tied the letter to the string. Then he lifted the dog as high as he could and pushed the dog up and out and said, Go home, Caper, go home." The little dog scampered away and was soon at home. Well, folks, we're well past the halfway point here in these McGuffy's Readers. As we progress a little bit more, they get longer, a little bit harder sentence structure for somebody learning to read, a little bit more complex, and then they start drawing different writings from other authors, and they weave those into the McGuffy's Reader. And then by the time you get to book number 6, again, we're almost done with book number 3 here. We've got about 2 to 3/4 of it done. After book 6, the kid was on and he was out of school. 6 years was considered adequate back at one time in this nation. You could read, you could write, you could do some basic arithmetic. You had some kind of a moral upbringing, a moral foundation. You knew about God. You talked about him. You learned about how to say your prayers. And you knew that Jesus Christ was his son and that he says you must be born again. And that's about where the kids were back then. Well, folks, take care. Lord bless. I'm going to snap off right now. And this is the end of Prison News, the McGuffy's Readers section. Bye for now.